Welcome. Thank you for joining Snow Isle Libraries for Open Book with author Ann Cleeves. I'm Marie, and I'll be your host. Your mics are muted. Use chat to ask questions. We'll use chat on our end to share links to any lists and websites mentioned today. Look for them at the end of the program. Ann Cleeves is the award-winning New York Times best-selling author behind the Vera Stanhope, Shetland, and Two Rivers series. Her latest book is The Darkest Evening, the ninth entry in the Vera Stanhope series. You will find lists featuring Ann's books and related television productions on the events page. Are you planning to add the works of Ann Cleeves to your personal library? Support local independent bookstores with your purchases. Find a bookstore near you at bookshop.org. This event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in a few days. Open Book is supported by the Snow Isle Libraries Foundation. Visit the foundation online to learn more or to make a donation. Check our website often for additional opportunities to hear from authors, illustrators, and audiobook narrators. Now, let's meet Ann Cleeves.
Hello, Ann. This is Ann speaking. Marie is having a little problem there. We're very excited to have you here today with us. Marie will be back with us as quickly as possible. So perhaps you could do a little introduction of your latest book while we wait for Marie to rejoin us.
Yeah, of course. Well, The Darkest Evening is a Vera book, and it's perfect for this time of the year because it's set just before Christmas. It's a winter book, and Vera is driving home in a blizzard, and it's snowy, and she loses concentration and loses her way and becomes quite disorientated and is following a road through the forest and sees a car ahead of her. And she stops, she's in her trusty Land Rover, she stops, she gets out to see if she can help. But there's nobody in the car door is open, and she just assumes that the person who's been driving has gone away to get help. And she's about to carry on when she hears a cry, and there's a toddler strapped in the back seat of the car. As we know, Vera doesn't have a maternal bone in her body, but she takes the child with her and carries on, and eventually comes to a big country house. And that's when she knows where she is. She recognizes it as Brockburn, and that's where her family grew up.
Thank you. Kurt, we have a number of co-hosts here with us here today. And it looks like Marie is coming back, actually. I can see her smiling face up here. She's connecting to audio, so we'll just wait for her to rejoin us so that you two can carry on your conversation today. We're really excited to have you here with us for the Open Book event, and happy that you could make it from your time zone so far away. It's evening over there, and we're mid-morning here.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to be here, and I hope that that Marie can join us soon.
She is trying very hard to get back in. I can see her.
Yeah, I can see her. I just can't hear her.
Yeah. So for all of our attendees, thank you for your patience. We all know that in this time of the pandemic, when we're working with technology, that things unfortunately don't always go as we hope to have them go. I think everyone is very forgiving and looking forward to the conversation that you're going to have with Marie. And let me just see here. I'm seeing lots of comments in the chat that people are excited to be here with us today. I think everyone's very patient.
So shall I start answering some of the questions in the chat?
Sure, why don't you do that? We'll get to some of those.
Yeah, I can do that. So let me just see. Are there plans to turn my new book into a movie or episode of Vera? And that comes from Dan Fisher. I don't know is the answer, because it's really tricky with COVID and filming. So there are 2 new episodes of Vera were filmed just before Christmas, and that was terrific. But then we had another lockdown, and I'm not quite sure what's happening with filming now, and I've not seen the script. So it's all, everybody's just a bit up in the air, but we're hoping that we'll be able to get back to normal fairly soon, because we're all vaccinating like fury and our numbers are stabilizing a bit. So yeah, we hope that it'll happen soon. This is, how do you develop your complex plots? Do you start with the ending and work backwards, or develop one chapter at a time? I don't plot at all. I'm one of those people who has a kind of theme in mind, or it might just be one metaphor, or it might be a beginning, like Vera getting lost in the snow, and I'll write that scene, and I write like a reader. So I start writing and I'll write the first chapter, and then I need to know what happens next, so I carry on writing and I'll write the next chapter, and that's how it goes. So yeah, I don't do that at all. So sorry, I'm gonna have to put my specs on because I can't read these without my glasses on. So how much input do I have on the television series? This is from Amy, and she notices that the Shetland TV series deviates from both the characters' personal storylines and the type of mysteries involved. Yeah, the first few episodes were adaptations of the books, but then a brilliant producer called Elaine Collins, who produced both Vera and Shetland in the early days, decided that she wanted to do a meatier plot. So they decided they would do one story over 6 episodes. And so things really took off quite differently then. But I think in both series, although they don't follow the books exactly, you do have a real, they get the essence of it right, and they get that sense of, I don't know, a kind of morality, I think, a kind of moral compass. And that is more important to me than the details of the book. If I plot as I go, when do I know who's done it? Probably about halfway through. Perhaps that's a good thing, because it means that readers maybe don't always work out what's going to happen either. Wendy says she would love to see the glass room as a plot line for the TV show. I think the glass room is the one that has never been adapted, the only book that's never been on the screen, and I think that was because it's quite wordy. It's set in a writer's retreat, or a workshop for writers, a weekend workshop for writers. So it's about books and it's about words, and it's not, it would be quite difficult, I think, to film visually, and it's quite enclosed, and I think viewers love to see the big open countryside of Northumberland. So I think that's maybe why that was never done. A question from Carolyn White. Did you live in the Faroe Islands for the Shetland stories? I didn't live in the Faroe Islands. I lived in Fair Isle, which is something a bit different. Fair Isle is one of the Shetland Islands. It belongs to Shetland. Shetland is an archipelago, so it's a group of islands. And Fair Isle is the most southerly and the most remote. Is that? No, I don't think Marie's back quite yet.
Not quite. Hey, Anne, this is Kurt over at the libraries.
Hi.
Hey, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You said that you write like a reader. How does that affect your
Yeah.
storytelling?
I think that I'm not sure how it affects the storytelling, but it's the only way I can do it. I think I would feel there was no point in writing the book if I knew how it was going to end. So it's got to be fun, really. Because for 20 odd years I was writing and I didn't have any commercial success at all. So it had to be something that I really enjoyed doing. And I need that sense of danger and that sense of excitement, I think, to get through to the end.
Great. It looks like Marie might be back. Marie, I'll turn it back over to you. I'm afraid Marie is still not quite connected yet. So, and
Well,
I'll try
I'll
to.
leave it to you, Kurt.
Let me go through some questions here from our audience.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Let me scroll back up here. Sherry Pride asks, are you glad that the TV series made Vera a little less frumpy?
Well, I was very, very glad when they decided that they would ask Brenda Blethyn to play the part. You know, somebody says there's a double Oscar nominee who's going to play a character that you've created. That's very, very exciting. And I know the way she works. She was in obviously films like Little Voice and Secrets and Lies. And her way of working is to really inhabit the character, to get to know the character very well. So she does read all the books. She calls that going back to the source material. And Brenda in real life is anything but frumpy. She scrubs up very well. She's amazingly elegant. But I think I was glad that they didn't pretty her up too much for the TV, because I wanted a real woman, a woman of a certain age who didn't really care what she looked like, but who had the authority and the competence to carry through an investigation.
Okay. Well, that sort of leads up to a question from Pat Greenstreet. She wants to know, or he wants to know, was there a particular person in your life who inspired the Vera character? As a woman of a certain age, I love and appreciate her.
Not one person, but I was born in the mid-50s, so not very long after the end of the Second World War. I think, well, they'd either lost sweets or they decided that they'd been given roles and responsibilities during the war that they weren't allowed to keep afterwards. You know, women were able to take on very responsible roles during the war because there weren't men there to do it. But when the men came back, suddenly they were supposed to be housewives again. And I'm thinking of infant school head teacher, the matron of the hospital, those sorts of women who are incredibly authoritative and competent, but who didn't care what they looked like.
Okay. Yeah, David Owens would like to ask, Shetland, how many more novels do we have to look forward to?
I finished the Shetland book. So Wildfire is the 8th, and that's the last of the Shetland novels. There will still be Shetland TV shows. And again, filming's been halted because of COVID, but there will be more of those. But no, I thought Shetland has a population of 23,000 in all the islands. And between us, the BBC drama, we've killed off a fair few. And I decided that 8 was enough. I wanted to stop while I was still enjoying writing them. And I'd said all that I wanted to say about the place. I love Shetland. I know it very well. I lived in Fair Isle. So I stopped after 8.
Okay. Will there be, Barbara Sharp asks, will there be more Matthew Venn books?
Yes, there definitely will be. I've just sent the proofs back today. So there is Matthew Venn 2, and that will come out in September, beginning of September in the US. And I can't really tell you anything about the story because that would be giving it away. I'll tell you how it started though. It started with the idea of glass blowing. The idea that I have a friend who blows glass, and it's beautiful glass, that when you're blowing glass, the glass is very pliable and it's liquid and you can't break it because it's there, you can mold it. But then when it's cold, it just cracks. And that made me think of people really who can bowl along quite happily and can withhold strain and stress, and suddenly they crack. And that's how it came about. But it's set in North Devon again.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I'm going to shift over and try to get to some more of Marie's questions for you. How about if you tell us what kind of jobs you did before your writing career really kicked off?
I did lots of jobs. I dropped out of university. So before university, I'd done, Saturday holiday jobs because I lived in a holiday town in North Devon. That's where I grew up. So I had lots of those. Then I dropped out of university and went to Fair Isle to be an assistant cook in the bird observatory there. Couldn't cook, didn't know anything about birds, but I'd met someone in a pub who said that they needed somebody. And so off I went. That was an adventure. And I was a probation officer. So I did my social work training and worked with the courts and with offenders. And I was an auxiliary Coast Guard, because when we were first married, my husband and I lived on this tiny tidal island off the west coast. And he was warden, it was local authority, nature reserve. And I was always very upset because he was the Coast Guard in charge and I was the Coast Guard. And more recently, I've worked in public libraries. So I was reader development officer for a library authority in Yorkshire. And my work was to promote reading, really, to set up reading groups and organize author events. And by that time, I was already a published author. And I was a bit miffed because I was promoting everybody else's books, but I couldn't really promote mine.
Okay. I've got another question here from our audience. Kathy Moss wants to know, who are your favorite authors?
Oh, I love crime fiction, so I read a lot of crime fiction. I think we're certainly in the UK. I don't know so much about what's going on in the US, though there are writers there whom I really enjoy, like Laurie Raider Day and Louise Penny, who's Canadian, but she's a good friend of mine. Katrina McPherson, who's Scottish but lives in California. But my real reading passion is crime in translation, because I think I love to travel, and it's a way of traveling vicariously. But I think if we read another culture's popular fiction, we really have a sense of their preoccupations. So the Icelanders like Ragnar Jónsson and Yrsa Sigurðardóttir, and I loved Henning Mankell's books, The Swede. So Fred Vargas, who's a French writer. So I like that sense of, it's a bit like, it's quite a delicious voyeurism, really, because you do get an insight into another country's domestic life as well as their politics.
Yeah. Let me ask you, how did your work in other fields inform your writing?
I think people think that because I was a probation officer and working with offenders that helped, but I think it only did, in that it gave me access to all sorts of families that I might not otherwise have met. So I did a lot of work with the courts. I did meet murderers because I was supervising people on life license and visiting them in prison. But really it was that sense of going into all sorts of different families and having the license to ask very intrusive questions, because I was wanting to know what had led to the offending behavior and what we might do to stop it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated by family, by dysfunctional families, and what holds families together and what breaks them apart. And usually within the books, there's something like that going on. But I'm interested in the wider family too, the community.
Yeah. So Julie asks, do you research how detectives actually work?
I'm very idle, so my idea of research is to find friends and talk to them. So I've got a brilliant friend who's called Professor James Grieve, and he's a forensic pathologist, and he worked in Aberdeen. So if there were a murder in Shetland, he would go up to the islands to investigate, and certainly went to both Orkney and Shetland when there were unexplained deaths. And so I do phone him up, and with the most recent Matthew Venn book, which has this theme or this idea of motif of glass running through it, and the victims are stabbed with hand-blown glass. So I was able to talk to him about, did you really kill somebody by sticking a bit of glass in them, and where would it be most effective, and all sorts of things like that, which are very useful. And then I've got another good friend who's a former crime scene manager who now teaches on the policing course in a local university, and she too is very, very helpful. So and another friend who's a great soil scientist, a forensic soil scientist. So that they all feed into the books.
Yeah. So when you and I talked before, or we emailed before, and I asked you, does Britain have, or do British authors have a preoccupation with a lot of crime? It feels like there's a lot of crime murders going on in Britain almost all the time. Could you talk about
maybe
that?
I think perhaps those are the books that people that get sold to the States. So I think that maybe you have that sense that we're all writing about crime, but I'm sure that's not true. We've got very, very fine literary authors as well, but they maybe don't travel so easily. I think we have a tradition in this country of crime writing. So way back, Sherlock Holmes, G.K. Chesterton and his short stories, and then the golden age, between the wars of Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, and then more recently people like P.D. James and Ruth Rendell. And so we have this tradition of, particularly I think, women writing crime fiction, though that's changed a bit now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is, for me, when I started writing, I thought I was going to write a great work of literature. And I think I'm quite good at creating character, but I'm really not very good at plotting. I'm never quite sure what I'm going to make my people do. So having that structure of a traditional crime novel, a murder close to the beginning of the book, and then a limited number of suspects, and then some form of resolution at the end, that felt to me like a structure that, and there were rules that I could subvert, and I could explore all sorts of different things while using that structure of the crime novel.
Yeah. Okay, so Judy Kleinberg wants to know, when you begin a series, do you have an idea about the full arc of the character story through the entire series, or does each book evolve individually and or suggest the next?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because I love writing series because you can unpeel the onion and you can see the layers underneath as you go on. You have the time to do that. I think I instinctively know the characters before I start the series, so I have very much a sense of them. I think it's like writing from memory rather than imagination. So I really feel that I know these people, but I might not know the details of their life. I know the important bits. With Matthew Venn, I knew that Matthew Venn was gay. I knew that he'd been brought up in a strict evangelical community, that he'd lost his faith, and when he lost his faith, he lost his family. And so I knew that, but there are details still that I need to explore, and having the chance to do that over a lengthy series is very satisfying.
Yeah. I want to get back to somebody else wants to know what Belayan Sharples says. British crime often takes place in villages where there seem to be a lot of murders. Why?
I think it's the tradition again, and I don't think that, I think maybe again that there is crime fiction that doesn't travel so well, that is very much urban set here. But I think you have a sense of British crime writers of writing in that tradition of villages and village murders, and I think that can be a bit of a pastiche. And for me, moving north to Northumberland was brilliant, because there used to be coal mines here, and bits of the southeast of the county are really very deprived. There are problems with drugs, but they are still very, and lots of unemployment, but they're still very, very strong communities. And suddenly I found a place where I could realistically write a village murder mystery, because people do very much know each other's business here, and they're very concerned for each other. But I could also explore those issues of social justice that were important to me. And I think if I were writing a murder mystery in the south of England, especially bits of the affluent south, quite a lot of those villages have second homers living in them. They have people who are commuting to the city for work, and they probably doesn't have that strong sense of community that we have here.
Yeah, we have that in America too. It's, you have people who, like I live in a very small community, pretty far away from anybody, and we all care about each other. So, but we don't have a lot of murders going around.
No, I think again, it is that tradition. It's the golden age tradition. So there is that sense that I write about villages because that's what I know, that's where I live. Right. Yeah. But there is a sense, I think, that in other places that's the only crime fiction that the British write. But there are lots of really great people who write. Someone like Cath Staincliffe, who I think is very underrated, who sets her books in the city in Manchester, and just too many to mention really. Ian Rankin, of course, is the big one who sets his books in Edinburgh. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah. Another question from our audience, from Christine Hill. She says, another question about actual writing, something I have often wondered about professional novelists. Do you find you often write into a dead end and have to undo the plot, erase and begin a part again? Or do you just find a way through the plotting, never going back?
I do go back because I don't plot in advance. I do need to go back because I'll suddenly have an idea of, that's where, sometimes this, and about powerful men, actually. And then I had to go back and rewrite bits to make that work, really. So it's I do go back, I do rewrite a lot as I'm going along.
Yeah, okay. Ben Lett wants to know if you have much involvement with the TV adaptation of The Long Call, or do you wish to see what they do on screen with the story?
Yeah, I have some, because it's the same production company that makes Vera Shetland and will do The Long Call. I have a very good relationship with them now, and I trust them because I think they've done very well with Vera and Shetland. But place is very important in my books. I think place isn't just a pretty backdrop to the action, place it defines who we are. We are the sum of the children we played with in the street and the community that we grew up in and the schools that we went to, and that's all about place. And so it's always important to me that the shows are filmed where the books are set. So I do a writer's recce with the team before we start. So we go to the place. So we go to North Devon and we'll have a look round with them. And I'll meet the script writer then and answer any questions that they have. And then really I hand it over to them because I think they know how to make good television and I don't at all. So I hand it over to them, and And also, I think they probably have a very clear vision of what they want to do with the story. And me sticking my oar in and saying, oh, no, my Matthew Venn wouldn't do that, or no, my Vera wouldn't do that, is going to muddy the clarity of their vision, and that would make it less good television. So I tend to let them get on with it. And I usually get invited to the cast and crew screening. So I do see it before everybody else. It gets to go on the television. And that's a lovely time because I meet the cast then and the crew. And before COVID, I was always invited to the read through too, which is when the first episode is that everybody sits around a table and gets back together again and reads through the script. But we had to do that over Zoom this time for the Vera filming.
Right. So let me ask you about the Shetland series and how it went from Black Raven was originally going to be a short story. So can you explain how it grew from that into a planned quartet and then an octet?
Yeah, well, Raven Black came about because my husband was a passionate bird watcher. I'd met him on Fair Isle. He came as a visiting birder to Fair Isle. And it was, and we'd been back to Shetland. I've got very good friends there, but we were living south then. It was a very rare bird turned up in Shetland, and it was the midwinter, the 2004, 2005. So my Christmas present to him was that we would day trip Shetland to see this bird, which was just crazy. So we drove up to Aberdeen. It's an overnight ferry from Aberdeen up to Shetland. It takes 13 hours on the ferry. And we arrived there. And Shetland is on the same line of latitude as bits of Alaska and Greenland. So it's a long way north. And so it doesn't get light really in midwinter until about 10 o'clock in the morning. But we got off the boat, and Tim stuck up his telescope waiting for it to get light for this bird to turn up. But it was the most beautiful day I'd known on Shetland. No wind, which is very unusual, and it had snowed. And luckily he saw the bird. It would have been a bit mean if we'd gone all that way and it had flown off, but he did see it. And I remember very well it was an American coot, which is quite like a British coot, but he was very excited. But it had snowed, and all these ravens, which are the iconic birds in Shetland, playing against the snow. And because I'm a crime writer, I thought if there was blood as well, it would be almost mythic, like a fairy story. A good way of starting it with the colours. And yeah, that's when I started. And yeah, I thought it would be an impertinence for me as an outsider to write a full-length novel set in Shetland. But I went back because by that point I was working for the libraries. I was doing some librarian training and went up to do a bit with the Shetland libraries, which are brilliant, and said, I've got this idea for a book, but I can't really, can I? And they said, oh yeah, you must, and introduced me to a former cop. And so I was able to chat to him. And what would you do if there were a murder on Shetland? Would you investigate it, or would somebody come in from outside?
Yeah.
They'd have to bring somebody in from outside. And already then you've got the start of a story, because you've got the tension between the people coming in from outside and the people who are there.
Yeah. So that the Raven, the whole
that
Black
was Raven
Raven.
Black, and that was going to be a standalone novel. Yeah, my editor said that she really liked it, but it would stretch credibility too far to have more than one murder in Shetland. Well, but then the book sold better than anything else I'd ever written, and she decided it would run to a short series.
Cool. Well, let's talk about some birds and ornithology. How did you get all of your ornithology knowledge, and do you have a favorite bird? Anne, did you get that, or did I drop off?
No, I'm sorry, I lost you there.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we were talking about Raven Black, and I'd like to know, how did you acquire all of your ornithology knowledge, and do you have a favorite bird?
Well, the birding came through my husband, and I'm not really interested at all, but it seeped in through osmosis, because he worked for the RSPB, which is our conservation charity, for the whole of his career. So, I was always putting up birders who were coming down from the hills, who were doing surveys for him, or so yeah, I just got to my favorite bird. I love storm petrels. I love seabirds, and storm petrels are little, wonderful little seabirds that only come ashore at night.
Mhm. So, okay, we're going to go back to back to our audience. Peter Messenger wants to know, how would you define the criminal mind?
So how would I define the criminal mind?
Yes,
Is that right?
that's correct.
Yeah, I think I don't write about monsters, so I know that there are people who are very disturbed, but the criminal mind in my books are ordinary people who have been pushed to extremes, I think.
Mhm.
I'm more interested in that. It's I don't want to write about serial killers. I want to write about ordinary people who, for some reason or other, are pushed so far that they commit murder.
Yeah. Okay, let me switch screens here. How does it, so when you, now that some of your books have been adapted to successful TV series, how does it feel to see your work translated to screen adaptations?
It doesn't feel as if it belongs to me then. But then when the books get into the hands of readers, I don't feel they belong to me either, because everybody brings their own interpretation to a book. You know, they bring their own prejudice and their own history and their own imagination to a story. And so it belongs to the reader more than me once it's out there in the world. And really giving it up to a director and a group of actors is just one stage further on from that, I guess.
Yeah.
And I love watching them. So we have Vera here on a Sunday night, and I sit and I have a glass of wine and I watch Vera, and if it's an original story, because I've obviously only written 9 books, but there have been 40 episodes.
Right.
And so most of them are original, written by brilliant script writers, and I watch them and I enjoy them like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, that leads to a question from Mary Walker, who says about the Vera television series. In the future, if the TV people want to do a quote young Vera unquote series, much like Endeavor and Inspector Morse or Tennyson Prime Suspect, how involved would you want to be in such a project?
I think that would be quite fun to be involved in that. I wouldn't want to write the script, but I might like to think about the character development and think how a young Vera might have been, because if we're looking back to when Vera might have been a young detective, that would be the 80s probably here. And that was a really interesting time here in the Northeast, because it was the time of the miners' strikes, which was when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister and was determined to break the unions. And so there was this real polarization and this real tension. And people still remember very much the police officers coming up to break the strike or to stop to support the picket, to stop the pickets. And so that would be quite, I would want somebody who knows that history, I think, to write the script. So somebody with a Northeast history, or somebody interested in finding out about the social history of the time to write it, because there's loads and loads of great material.
Yeah. Well, Wendy Lounsbury wants you to do that.
Okay.
She said a young Vera in the 80s and Peter, your partner who died. I would love to see that.
Yeah, that would be good fun, I think. But at the moment, we've still got Brenda, who is so good, and I just hope she keeps going and keeps going. But that would be quite fun to do.
Yeah. Hiroko wants, he or she says, and you say that you were good with creating characters, but not so good at plotting. How long did it take you to get published?
I was very lucky, but again, that happened in the 80s. So my first book was published in 1986, which is a long time ago. And that first series was about bird watching, and it was very traditional. It was very golden age, really. So it featured a an elderly naturalist, because I'd read all these books when they were all amateur sleuths and they were all quite well-to-do. And so that's what my first detective, who was called George Palmer Jones, was like. And so he tripped over bodies in nature reserves and things. And I was very lucky. It just, I think I sent it to, I didn't have an agent, but I sent it to a couple of publishers, and then the third one took it.
Yeah.
But it was a lot easier to get published then, because it was at the start when publishing suddenly was getting a lot cheaper, and publishers hadn't realized that they might be able to publish all these books relatively cheaply, but there wasn't that much bookshelf space. You know, there was only so much. And so there were quite a lot of books published at that time, and then people who had dropped quite quickly. And because they paid me such very small advances, I managed to sell just enough to get over the accountant's line and still be published the next time.
Yeah. Let me ask, what were some of your favorite books as a child and a teenager?
I suppose I read whatever I could get my hands on. My parents, we didn't have a lot of books in the house, but we were great library users, my parents as well. So although we didn't own a lot, and there was that ritual of the Saturday trip to the library. And I remember the name of the librarian, who was called Mrs. Gregory, Gwen Gregory. And I don't remember any of my teachers' names when I was 5, 6, 7, but I remember her. And she knew the sort of books that I'd like, and she'd save. I was an Enid Blyton child, and I loved mysteries even then, I think. And she would pull them out from behind the counter and give them to me. She'd save them. She knew what I liked. And I can remember walking home, reading it as I was walking, and finishing it by the time I got home. So that a great writer called Malcolm Saville, who wrote books set in the countryside, lots of the Swallows and Amazons, books where kids were allowed to roam wild and do their own things and have adventures.
Yeah.
And then as a teenager, I suppose, I did literature for sixth form, for A levels, for advanced level. So just everything. And I would go through phases. So I go through an American phase and read all the American literature that I could get my hands on, and then a Russian phase. And I think when you're that young, you just assimilate everything.
Yeah.
But my comfort reading, I mean, I would read that and it would be a challenge and I would love it and lose myself in it. But if I had the flu or I'd been dumped by a boyfriend, it was always traditional crime fiction that I went back to.
Right. So Marie, our host, is not yet connected. And I don't know if we're ever, I'm sorry, we may not get Marie back, but she did ask a question in chat. She wants to know, what have libraries meant to you in your life and in your career?
Well, libraries have meant everything for me. I wouldn't be a reader if it weren't for libraries. And I wouldn't still be a published author because it was libraries who supported me. In those early days when you'd hardly ever see an Ann Cleeves on a bookstore shelf, maybe some independent bookstores, but certainly not the big chains. And in those days, libraries, I think certainly in the UK, were better supported from central government, so they had better book funds. And they were great at supporting new authors, and publishers knew that they could sell, I don't know, 1,000 copies of a hardback into libraries. And then I got to know my local libraries and I would go and give talks. And so they meant so much to me. And now I want to, I suppose, to pass that joy on to other people. And last year, Vera would have been 21. Her first book was, the first Vera book was published in 21 years ago. And so 1999. And so as a sort of gift from Vera, I'm sponsoring this project to look at the link between reading and health, because I think that reading is, and especially if you've got mild depression or anxiety and you've got all these strange ideas rattling around in your head, sometimes it's great to be inside somebody else's head for a little while, and you can do that when you're reading.
Yeah.
So we've got this project with 5 local authorities in the Northeast. And here I was trying to explain before to Marie that our doctors have something called social prescribing. So family doctors, if they've got a patient who has maybe got chronic arthritis or has diabetes, they can prescribe membership of a gym or a rambling club or yoga classes or meditation classes, and our National Health Service will pay for that.
Yeah.
And so with our project, we're looking at how we might prescribe members of a reading group, or to meet someone. We're going to employ 10 reading champions or reading coaches who will be individuals who can recommend books or chat to people about books. And so reading for pleasure, we're not teaching people to read, but reading for pleasure will become a part of their lives and a part of their treatment. And we're going to evaluate and see if that works. And I think especially after lockdown, in some communities here, older people especially have been locked down for months and months and months.
Yeah.
And when we start to release those restrictions, having one person that you can meet or become a member of a reading group, but also to share that joy of having read the same book, even if that's virtually, if we can't meet in person for a while, I think will be life affirming. I hope so.
Yeah. I'll do a couple of more questions from the audience. And if any audience members have questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Laura Moe asks if you've ever considered writing a young adult novel.
No, I think my books are suitable for younger readers. I'm not interested in writing graphic violence. I would hate to write bad sex, so I don't try and write sex at all. So I think they would be suitable certainly for, I don't know, 12, 13 up.
Yeah. Dorothy Colwyn asks, how did you conceive of Vera? She is such a pleasant person, so opposite of a Holmes character.
Yeah, I think she did grow out of those formidable spinsters that I knew when I was growing up. Those women who are so competent and so authoritative, but are sometimes just overlooked. And so I wanted a character who wouldn't be overlooked, who was determined not to be overlooked. I think at the heart of Vera is a determination not to be patronized. And I think that's why her team find her very difficult, because she refuses to patronize them by praising them unnecessarily. I think she's just starting to learn that sometimes a bit of praise can help people on their way.
Yeah. So, we also talked earlier before we did the interview about COVID and traveling, how you used to just love to travel and got a lot of your little characters and scene development from just looking out the train window or overhearing a conversation in a shop. So how, in the last year, that's definitely changed how you can do your writing. So how do you manage that now?
I still listen to conversations in supermarkets. I've got my mask on, but I'm there earwigging like crazy. I can't obviously travel or go on trains now, but I live in Whitley Bay, which is this seaside town, a rather faded seaside town, which is coming back to life, I think, is becoming quite arty and quite hip in a strange sort of way. And it never was that a few years ago. But it's since lockdown, we've had lots of people were allowed our daily exercise. So everybody's out walking on the promenade or walking on the beach or taking their dogs out for a walk. And I do still overhear conversations and I see how people are behaving. And wild swimming has become a big thing. Cold water swimming has become a big thing here. And I've just written a short story which is about wild swimmers, and that came just from observation, just from watching what's going on in my particular town. Yeah.
So Anne Belmont asks, when did you first know that you wanted to be a writer? What was the attraction?
I think I was always going to be a storyteller. Even before I could read and write, I can remember running a narrative in the third person in my head, describing what was going on in my life,
Mhm.
probably making me the central character in the in the narrative. But and that stopped once I started reading and writing, strangely. But
Mhm.
I think I was always an observer looking in. And my dad was a village head teacher, primary school head teacher, teaching younger kids. And we lived in, when I was sort of 7, 8, 9, which is when the real writing bug got me, we were living in this tiny hamlet, and there were 30 kids in the school, 15 infants and 15 juniors, and it was one room with a curtain down the middle. And if you're the teacher's kid in a place like that, it's not easy. I didn't have that many close friends. So I was that kid who was always listening and always watching and always taking notes, and then and reading a lot, and started writing absolutely dreadful verse, but soon came to stories. Never wrote short stories, actually. It was always going to be a novel. Short stories are hard to write. I write them now, but they're very hard.
Yeah. Nancy E. wants to know, is there a book that you would love to read again for the first time?
Oh, lots. Yeah, there's a very strange book, which in French is Le Grand Monde, and in English is something like The Lost Domain. And it was written right at the beginning of this century, I think. And I loved that. It's written by Alain Fournier, and it's a kind of rite of passage book. And I found it magical when I first read it. And still, I do go back and reread it and love it, even though the plot doesn't really hold together. There is something just so charming about it.
Yeah.
That would be it.
Okay. I think this is a question from Marie. Vera's father taught
Poor
Vera.
Marie, I feel so
Poor
sorry,
I know.
Marie.
Oh, Marie, we'll get through this. Vera's father taught Vera everything she knows about birds, but from an unexpected perspective. Is Hector based on a real person?
Hector's based on a number of people. Hector is not a nice man. Hector would have been all right as a dad, I think, if his wife had lived, because he married the village school teacher, and he was madly in love with her, and then she died soon after Vera was born, and he didn't want a child, and he certainly didn't want a daughter. And he's a shady countryside character who made a living out of stealing raptors, birds of prey from the wild, and selling them on for falconry, and by trading in rare birds' eggs. And as I say, my husband worked for a conservation charity, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. And when we were first married, he did quite a lot of protecting of wild birds. So we did do stakeouts, waiting for people to go and steal eggs. And so it was quite interesting cops and robbers stuff. So yeah, some of the villains that he helped catch made their way into Hector.
Yeah. We may have touched a little bit on this before, but Christine Hill asks, what part of England is Vera based in? And is it nearby to where you grew up or have lived? I'm also interested in the accent we hear in the episode, not one that Vera has.
Yeah, I grew up in North Devon, so right at the other end of the country from Vera country, and I've got a very mixed accent. It's fairly, because I've lived in lots of different places, I don't really have a regional accent anymore. I did have a bit of a Devon accent before.
You have a nice English accent.
But I don't have an English accent, yeah. But Vera is right up in Northumberland, which is as far as you can go north in England.
It's just below Scotland.
It's right on the Scottish. Yeah, it's right on the Scottish border. We have Hadrian's Wall, and we have the North Sea to one side and the Pennines to another, and the River Tyne as the southernmost boundary. So it's wild country.
Yeah.
And there were always border reavers coming in and across the border to steal cattle, and it's a lovely place.
Yeah.
My daughters and my grandchildren obviously have thick Northumbrian accents, Geordie accents, and I don't.
So how does a Northumberland accent differ from a Yorkshire accent or a Liverpudlian accent?
Oh, they're all very different, and I can't do them otherwise. The word Vera is Northumberland. So and Kenny Doughty, who plays Aidan, he's got, I think, a Mancunian accent, so he's not Northumberland. Whereas David Leon, who played the first Joe Ashworth, he was from here, so he had a real authentic Northeast accent.
Okay. Another Anne wants to know, hello, Mrs. Cleves. Is The Darkest Evening Vera's swan song? It seems she was so shaken by all of the events she could legitimately retire now.
No, I'm writing a new Vera now, so there will be more. I love writing Vera. I can't retire her yet. She's not aging in real time in the books. She can go on for a few more.
And Mandy would like to know, are you approached frequently by fans of your writing and for the shows? What is the experience like, and are you used to it?
Well, no, because nobody knows what writers look like. It's different. If it was Brenda walking down Park View in Whitley Bay, people would know her immediately, though maybe not, because she doesn't look like Vera when she's being herself. But no, people don't really recognize writers. People in the town where I live know, some of them know that I write the books, and that's lovely because they come up and say that they enjoy them. And Shetland is so small that I know lots of people there too. But
yeah.
Otherwise, no.
So from the Shetlands, have you ever, Kim wants to know, oh wait, no, not somebody else. Kelly Sykes, have you ever seen the Northern Lights, and do any of your books incorporate them?
None of my books do, and I've seen them from Fair Isle, and I've seen them from the Western Isles as well. I've been to Iceland a number of times, but I've never seen them there.
Wow.
But I have seen them from Shetland.
You know, every once in a while we can see, every few years we can see them from our latitudes here in Washington.
Yeah,
they're pretty cool.
They are.
Audience, if you have any other questions, go ahead and type them in and I will ask. Here we go. Patty Tingler, are either of your children following your lead as an author? Okay, Anne, did you get that one? Are either of your children following your lead as an author?
No, I didn't hear that one, sorry.
Oh, okay.
No, they don't.
No? Okay.
Well, they both write very well, but one is a midwife, but she's doing her bit for the COVID at the moment, so she's manning one of the vaccination stations, one of the GP hubs, so she's doing lots of vaccinating at the minute. And the other one is a university lecturer, but they both write really well, but I don't think they have any ambitions to be writers.
Okay. Kathy Moths wants to know, do you have a favorite book that you've written? That's almost like asking who your favorite child is.
It is a bit, and it's always the one that you've just finished, really, because that's the one that's in your head and you've got there and you're living with. I suppose the career changer for me was Raven Black, because I've been writing for 20 years before that was published, and I think it caught the reviewers' imaginations and readers' imaginations just because of the settings. Mm-hmm. And so it made a huge difference to my career, because I won the Gold Dagger and it started being published overseas, and it meant that I could give up the day job for the first time.
Yeah. So
that's quite important to me.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking about my earrings in the chat.
Yes.
Agatha Christie earrings. I don't know if you can see them, but
okay.
They've got pictures of Agatha Christie on. I wear them for crime events.
Marianne Legg asks, or she says, it's interesting that short stories are harder for you. Why is that?
I think with short stories, every word has to count. And really you're capturing usually one moment or one idea. And so it's, I think, yeah, you want the words to sing really. You can't have any wasted thoughts even. Everything that you think about that subject has to matter, and you have to put it down clearly on the page.
Yeah. So getting back to Vera, Jean Crisp wants you to discuss how you evolved such long-term relationships, specifically between Vera and Ashworth.
I think that
It's
just
kind of
developed as the books developed.
yeah. And she's asking as a love-hate relationship.
It is. I think Vera sees him as he is a kind of surrogate son, but he's also her conscience, because I think she would break rules far more readily without him there to rein her in.
Yeah.
And she knows that she should let him go. She knows that he should be allowed to go and apply for other, but she would miss him so much that she wants him to be there, so that there is a sort of tension between them too.
Yeah. Laurie Hughes wants to know if Northumberland area is as sparsely populated and dark and foreboding as it appears on the Vera program.
I think it is the least populated county in England, so that's probably about right. There are lots and lots of acres away from the city. I can see another one here from Ben. Would you be tempted to set a Vera story in the heart of Newcastle, away from the Northumberland moors? I'm not very good at cities. I've obviously set scenes in towns and scenes in the city, but my heart really is in rural communities.
Yeah.
That, again, it's what I know best.
Another question from Patty Tingler. How large is your library within your home?
Oh, too many books. They're piled up in bookshelves and in heaps on the floor, and I find it very difficult to give away books, but I should. And I get sent more and more, because now writers want me to ask me to endorse books, so publishers send me packages by the day.
Oh. Question from Ruth Levy. Why, when you aren't in author mode, what do you like to do? What are you missing most during COVID lockdowns?
Oh, I would love to go to the pub with my friends. I've got such good friends here, and our local pub, I mean, not to drink masses of beer or anything, but our local pub is a real community pub with elderly guys playing dominoes and people from all sorts of walks of life who know each other just because they meet in there sometimes and they chat, and all sorts of stories. So that would be lovely. Go back and do that. That would be nice.
Yeah. I think, do you have anything else you want to bring to the conversation, Anne, that we might have skipped over?
I just would like to thank you, and for everyone who's come along and chatted and sent their questions in, and a big thank you to Marie, who set all this up, and then we were chatting so well earlier, and then she couldn't get back, and
I know
that's really sad. But I'll come and see you when all this is over. I'll come over to the lovely West Coast and come and visit your library in person.
It's a standing invitation. We would love to have you come over, and we would love to do a live event with you whenever we can get back to doing that. It's been hard for us.
That would be great. I'll be there like a shot. It just seems the sort of place that I would love, I think.
Yeah. Well, Anne, I'm not sure how to wrap this up, because I was not actually going to be the host. So I just want to thank you once again for taking the time out of your evening tonight to talk with us and to talk with our audience. Audience, if you have any other questions, we'll try to get them to Anne as we can. She may be able to answer them by email later. Otherwise, go ahead and explore our open book series at snowisle.org/openbook. Anne, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been lovely. Thanks very much, Kurt, and thanks everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye.